When we imagine the Victorian era, we imagine public order. Strict morality performed carefully in drawing rooms and along crowded city streets. But what happened when the doors closed?
Welcome to Literally Victorian with your host, Matthew Lee Hanson.
Hello and welcome back to the channel. I hope you are all doing very well indeed. Now, when we imagine the Victorian era, we imagine public order, high collars, structured manners and formal greetings. But behind closed doors things were a little more acute. The Victorian home was not merely shelter. It was a carefully constructed boundary between public and private worlds. Outside, one performed discipline. Inside, life softened, or at least it became a bit more complicated. Privacy, as we understand it today, was evolving during the 19th century. Earlier centuries often blurred domestic space. Servants moved constantly through upper-class homes. Working-class families lived in cramped rooms with little separation between individuals. Yet as the middle class expanded, so too did the idea of personal interior life. Parlours, bedrooms, studies, each room began to carry specific emotional meaning. The home became theatre. But theatre still requires rehearsal. Within domestic walls, Victorians negotiated the very desires they publicly restrained. Romantic letters were written at desks in lamplight, often far more emotionally expressive than conversation allowed. Courtship could be carefully structured in public, yet intensely vulnerable in ink. Longing, doubt, jealousy, devotion all found space on paper. Marriage itself was layered. Victorian society idealised the household as moral unit. The husband worked, the wife cultivated domestic order. Yet private relationships were more complex than the ideals suggested. Affection, frustration, companionship, hierarchy all existed simultaneously. The language of devotion often masked daily negotiation. The bedroom, though rarely discussed openly, symbolised both modesty and intimacy. Heavy curtains, carved bedsteads, and carefully arranged linens framed private life in weight and texture. Even architecture reinforced separation. Thick doors, layered fabrics, dim gaslight. The Victorian interior was designed to contain. Grooming rituals unfolded in this contained space. Hair was brushed and pinned, corsets tightened, beards were oiled and shaped, skin was washed, powdered and perfumed. These acts were private, yet performed in anticipation of public judgment. The body was prepared behind closed doors before it stepped into scrutiny. Adornment, too, often lived quietly. A discreet piercing, a hidden tattoo, jewellery worn beneath clothing. Victorian society did not lack bodily expression. It relocated it. What could not be displayed openly was simply concealed. Even entertainment had its private counterpart. Music halls and sensational fiction may have flourished publicly, but their emotional impact continued at home. Penny dreadfuls were read in bedrooms. Ghost stories were told around household fires. The appetite for thrill did not evaporate when curtains were drawn. Grief perhaps reveals the most intimate dimension of Victorian life. Mourning rituals were formal, yet sorrow itself was deeply private. Locks of hair were preserved in jewellery. Letters from the deceased were re-read in solitude. Portraits were kept close. The Victorian fascination with death was not purely morbid, it was personal. Spiritualism, too, often took place in drawing rooms rather than churches. Hands joined around tables in dim light, participants sought reassurance that separation was temporary. The séance blurred domestic comfort with existential longing. Behind closed doors, then, Victorian life appears less rigid than stereotype suggests. It was anxious, yes. Structured, certainly. But it was also tender, curious, negotiated daily. The public face of Victorian age prized restraint because the world was changing rapidly. Industry roared, empire expanded, cities swelled. Discipline offered stability. But no society lives entirely in its public posture. Private spaces allow contradiction. Within their homes, Victorians expressed affection, experimented with identity, struggled with expectation, and sought meaning in ways not always visible to history's broad portraits. The heavy curtains did not erase humanity. They framed it. And when we look beyond the formal photographs and moral codes, we find not a generation of caricatured prudes, but individuals navigating desire, duty, fear, and hope, much as we do now. Behind closed doors, the Victorian age was not less human. It was simply quieter about it. Thanks for watching, and until next time, bye for now.